Right now?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you so much for bringing us together here tonight to study thy word, Lord. We just ask for a blessing on the speaker and our speakers and on every one of us that are listening. Give us wisdom and understanding, Lord, and retention too, Lord. And help me with my memory, Lord. And just we ask for blessings on the health workers there through this pandemic and everybody that's exposed to it. We know these times are hard, but this is just a taste of what's going to be coming on us, Lord. So give us strength and understanding, Lord. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
No.
Who's SF? SF.
So the title of this presentation is Supreme Court Cases, and Tess Lambert did it in March of this year. So key point to remember. So each dispensation has one testing message that may seem like disconnected message, but it's actually just one message. The first message. The first message given to God's people was reform lines, but is every line a reform line? No. We have our reform line, then other histories and other lines get overlaid on our own. There are 4 key reform lines, and that is the reform line of the priest, and the first thing opened is reform line. The 4 key reform lines are the Alpha and Omega histories of ancient Israel and the Alpha and Omega histories of modern Israel. The Alpha history of ancient Israel began with the coming out of Egypt. The Omega history was coming out of the captivity to Rome. In the Alpha history of modern Israel, you have the Millerites coming out of the 1260, and in our history, you have us coming out of the 126. So Israel has an Alpha and Omega history. In the Alpha history, there are Alpha and Omega histories. The Alpha history was the history of Moses. The Omega history was the history of Christ. In the Omega history of Israel, there are Alpha and Omega histories. The Alpha history was the history of the Millerites. The Omega history is the history of the 144,000. The reform lines are key in understanding the closing history. So 2019, and we are right here before the increase of knowledge or in increase of knowledge. The line of the priest. 2014 becomes the Sunday law. Then we go through the latter rain to the close of probation in 2019. Just before the close of probation on November 9, 2019, we began to refine our reform lines, but one in particular was refined in a special way. In this point in history, we need the Omega history of ancient Israel more than any other line. It would directly tell us about the Omega history of modern Israel. The line of Christ is an Omega history and line of success like ours. It is the line of Christ that will tell us most clearly where we are standing. Say we want to understand the Sunday law. What reform line do we need to understand? The line of the Millerites. We look at the history of 1850 and 1888. The next reform line God will open up will be the history of the Millerites, but we're not there yet. In the plowing. The plowing is all about telling us that we're in a new reform line. The former rain is all about time and telling us that we're approaching the Sunday law. The message during the latter rain was about nationalism and sexism, equality. Equality was how our reform line began. We would not have a reform line if church and state had not come together. Church and state would not have come together if there were not three primary movements before the time of the end. The Civil Rights Movement. The first movement was the Civil Rights Movement. Its focus was on nationalism and racism. Nationalism and racism are the same thing. It's like shades of a different color. Donald Trump is a nationalist. Shades of the same color. Donald Trump is a nationalist. He thinks his country is so special, which is nationalism, because it's this white Christian nation. That's what he thinks. And doesn't want it contaminated by all these other inferior people, which is racism. You can't have nationalism without racism and racism without nationalism. Hitler was a nationalist, therefore he had to protect his race from contamination from the inferior Jews, which is racism. So the first case was Brown versus Board of Education. On May 17, 1954, the Supreme Court ruled on Brown versus Board of Education, of the Brown versus Board of Education case, that it was unconstitutional to segregate. The court case began on December 9, 1952. This was the beginning of the end of segregation. So Brown versus Board of Education was in 1954. After the 1968 Supreme Court's Green versus County School Board of New Kent County, private school attendance in Mississippi nearly tripled. In 1968, there were 23,000 students in private schools. In 1970, there were 63,000 students in private schools. Also, white students in public schools number 770, and then the next year, 28, and then the year after that, 0. In 1964, there was a Supreme case, Alexander versus Holmes County Board of Education, that was about the delay in the desegregation of schools. On July 15, 1970, President Nixon told the IRS to stop counting segregated schools as tax exempt. In 1971, the Supreme Court case Green versus Connolly was decided. Private schools cannot discriminate against students based on race and still be tax exempt. This gained the attention of the religious right because it was them who built the private schools to take in the white students. Some schools that were built for this purpose were Bob Jones University and Liberty University. So in 1971, there was the court case Green versus Connolly. If you're a nationalist and you want your nation erased at the top, who threatens you? The IRS. The fear is over taxes. This was the same mindset that was seen at the beginning of this movement. It's a conspiracy theory of an overreaching IRS. It was the IRS that awoke the Protestants. It was the IRS that Ronald Reagan attacked to win the support of the Protestants. They're afraid of the IRS coming for their money, and that is exactly what Elder Jeff was afraid of. Racism. If you have a racist nationalist mindset, you're afraid of the Chinese, South Americans, Muslims, and Black people. You're afraid of extinction. The Chinese population is large and growing. Muslims have a lot of babies. They didn't want African Americans in America in the first place, and as segregation ended, they became more visible in society. So they were afraid of the extinction of the white European race. Their focus was on racism. Feminism. The first wave of feminism took place in 1919. This gave white women the right to vote. But why were white women given the right to vote? Black men had already been given the right to vote, so to give the white race more voting power, white women were allowed to vote. The second wave. In the second wave of feminism that began in the 1960s, women began considering the option of an actual career path. This was an issue with the extinction mindset. Why? If women were out working, they wouldn't be at home. And what do you need to not go extinct? You need women at home having babies, not working. This was the next issue for the right wing. So in the 1960s, you had the second wave of feminism. LGBT. Stonewall. The Stonewall riots took place from June to July 1969. It began by a police raid on a homosexual bar. Raids have been happening frequently and violently, but at this particular raid, something happened. Those homosexual people suddenly had had enough. They all united and stood up against the police. Before this, they hadn't stood up in any unified way. This was a shock, and it began a movement where they became unified and said they had had enough of the discrimination and persecution. So the Stonewall riots were in 1969. Nationalism. So if you had an extinction mindset, what's the problem with the LGBT community? They can't reproduce. The civil rights movement, the four waves of feminism, and the LGBT movement all link back to nationalism. Those movements, particularly the civil rights movement in connection with the IRS, are what sparked the moral majority which brought us to the time of the end. The moral majority from 1979 to 1989. The reform line of the priest can't begin with those three issues, then suddenly in the history of the Sunday law, they're going to care about Sunday. That's not the story. In the Millerite history, there was a movement fighting for discrimination and a movement fighting against it, the abolitionist movement. In our history, before the time of the end, there was the same thing. In the Millerite history, God's people sided with the abolitionists. So in our history, you know who we are to side with. In the Millerite history, it was about slavery all the way through, from before the time of the end to when the cup was full to judgment. So in our history, what we saw that began a reform line, those issues in America, become the external fight in the history of the Sunday law. (2014 to 2019). In 2014, you had three men, Jeff Sessions, Steve Bannon, and Stephen Miller. What is Stephen Miller's biggest issue? Immigration, the race issue. Those three men began overturning the Republican establishment in 2014. They began forcing out of the government all the Republicans who were willing to work with Obama and replacing them with far-right Republicans. The first man they got rid of was Eric Cantor. He was a reasonable politician. He didn't have strong nationalistic views. He was willing to compromise and work with Obama on the immigration issue. They replaced him with Dave Bratt, a right-wing Republican who wasn't willing to work with Obama. In 2014, Mitch McConnell began to work. He called it the greatest thing he's ever done in politics. What did he do? He blocked Obama from putting judges in the judicial system. Trump had been able to appoint in 3 years as many judges as Obama did in 8 years. The reason he's been able to do this is because Mitch McConnell blocked Obama from filling those vacancies. So when Trump became president, there were a lot of vacancies. In the Supreme Court, there are 9 judges. 5 are conservative and 4 are liberal. If Ruth Bader Ginsburg dies, there will be 6 conservative and 3 liberal judges. People already know that even if Trump lost the next election, it will be decades, if not a generation, before the damage he's done could be undone. Getting him out of office will not undo the damage he's done to the Supreme Court. The Republicans have done their work in the judicial system, and now the 3 issues are coming up again in court cases. The problems are that we're in an election year, there's a lot of problems with the Democrats, and COVID-19 is here. There are so many things happening that we aren't looking at the Supreme Court cases, particularly the ones that began in 2018 and 2019. At the beginning of his term, if Donald Trump wanted to get immigration bills passed, people could stop him. But the last travel ban went before the Supreme Court and passed. The 5 conservatives voted for it and the 4 liberals against it. The actions of Trump are no longer being held back by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has been a check on the religious right for at least the last 100 years, but now in the last 5 years, all that has changed. Before Reform Line, it was all about the court cases, the interpretation of the Constitution. When we come into our Reform Line, church and state have united, and in the 2014 to 2019 dispensation, what we should have seen was similar court cases. Before our Reform Line, it was about court cases, the judicial system, and the interpretation of the Constitution. From 2014 to 2019, it was about court cases, the judicial system, and the interpretation of the Constitution. The Supreme Court today. On July 2nd, 1964, the Civil Rights Act was passed. It said that it was illegal for an employer to discriminate against an employee based on their race, gender, or religion. The Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964. Price Waterhouse versus Hopkins. In 1989, Ann Hopkins was successful in her job, but the firm she worked for wasn't friendly to women. She was supposed to be given a promotion, but they refused because she didn't wear makeup, she was too strong, needed to be more feminine, needed to change her voice tone, and do her hair better. She took them to the Supreme Court and won. They were forced to give her the promotion because she was able to prove that she had been discriminated against based on her gender. The Civil Rights Act says you can't discriminate based on race, gender, or religion. When you talk about gender, it's gender stereotypes, that someone must look and act a certain way. In late 2019, there were 3 cases where homosexuals were discriminated against by their employers. They took it to the Supreme Court and said they were discriminated against based on gender stereotypes. The court will decide this year whether the Civil Rights Act protects homosexuals or not. So the same issues that we saw in the beginning of or before the time of the end were the same issues that are happening from 2014 to 2019. So the article that you can read if you want to about the Supreme Court cases in 2019 is from the conversation, does the Civil Rights Act protect LGBT workers? The Supreme Court is about to decide. One of the three Supreme Court cases mentioned earlier, the three in 2019 that are going to be decided this year, is Bostock versus Clayton County. In early 2013, he joined a gay softball league. In April, his employer, the county of Clayton, so he worked for the county, fired him. He took them to the Supreme Court and accused them of discrimination. He said they broke the Civil Rights Act. The Supreme Court will decide this year whether that's true or not. And that case was in 2019 and it's going to be decided this year. And another article about that same topic is from the New York Times. So, in conclusion, prior to the time of the end, there were three movements that united the religious right. Steve Bannon would tell you that everything went wrong from 1989 to 2001, particularly in the later years of George H.W. Bush, then Bill Clinton, then George W. Bush, and then everyone panicked under Barack Obama. He was the worst nightmare for the Christian nationalists. They united again, and this time with a plan. They began by taking down the judicial system and then the American government. The dispensation of 2014 and 2019 tested all three groups because even the Nethinims could see the court cases as well as we could. They were, of course, lacking the prophetic message, but 2014 to 2019 was their plowing, their preparation. Those court cases are what began a reform line, and they began the reform line of the Nethinims. When you come down to the Sunday law history, you know it can't be about a Sabbath Sunday issue. That is not what the Protestants are concerned about. So the court cases that were the issues before our time of the end were the issues from 2014 to 2019, which is the beginning of the reform line of the Nethinims, just like they were the issue in the beginning of the reform line of priests. Now it is time for review questions. So it's 11 questions. Oh, does anybody have any questions or comments before the questions? Okay.
Okay. So question 1. What was the first subject that we talked about that was opened up in this movement? So what was the first subject to be opened up in the movement?
Nationalism?
Equality.
Reform lines?
Yes, reform lines. So it was specifically the lines of ancient and modern Israel, which are the Millerites, Christ, Moses, and our time. Question 2. What reform line do we need most to understand the Sunday law in our time?
Millerites?
Yes, that's correct, the Millerites, because they had the Sunday laws of 1850 and 1888. So they can tell us about our Sunday law. Question 3. What issue began our reform line? So we talked about some court cases and movements before our reform line. What were all those court cases and movements dealing with what issue?
Racism,
Yes, and
racism, sexism, homophobia.
Was it
So-
Brown versus
Equality.
Brown versus
yes,
Board of Education?
that was one of the movements, yes. But the answer is equality. So all those movements were all talking about equality. Well, they were talking about nationalism, but that's the issue of equality.
Yeah, I misunderstood your first question because that's what I thought the question was on the first one.
Question 4. What was the first court case? Not the first court case, but what was the court case in 1954 that we talked about?
Brown
Brown
versus
Brown versus
Board of Education.
Board of Education. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. Brown versus Board of Education, and they were trying to desegregate public schools. Question 5. What was the court case in 1971 that we talked about?
Green versus Conley, or
Yes, that's correct. Green versus Connolly.
Oh.
Question 6. What movement began in the 1960s? This is the court cases movement.
that was the second wave.
Feminism. Feminism.
Yes, that's correct. Second wave feminism. Question 7. What movement began in 1969?
Homosexual, LGBTQ,
Yes, but do you know what it was called? Yes,
Stonewall.
Stonewall riots, or
yes, it was the Stonewall riots. And they were for equality as well. Question 8. What will the Sunday law look like based on these 3 movements? So all the court cases and movements were all into 3 sections, which are civil rights, feminism, and Stonewall. So the question,
Inequality,
yes, that's correct. So it'll be about equality, and the reason people be pushing for equality is because there will be discrimination. Question 9. What 3 conservatives began overturning the Republican Party to be more conservative in 2014?
Steve Bannon, Steve Miller, and one more.
Jeff Sessions.
Yes, that's correct. Steve Bannon, Jeff Sessions, and Stephen Miller. Question 11. Question 10. What did Mitch McConnell do in 2014 to help the far-right Republicans that were trying to overturn the...
Block Obama's
Yeah.
appointments of judges?
Yes. So he blocked Obama from appointing judges to the circuit court. So when a Republican became president, they would have all the spaces to fill. And final question, question 11. What court cases in 2018 and 2019, what are they dealing with?
LGBTQ, discrimination in the workplace.
That's one of them. Do you remember the other 2?
Those are the only 2 that were mentioned in this, but yes, they're also about gender and race.
Yes. So they're all about race, gender, and LGBTQ equality. And these are what court cases we should be looking at, even though there's a lot of stuff going on this year.
Yeah.
So the end.
Thank you. That was nice.
Yeah,
Quick
thank you.
Quick question, are all of those court cases at the Supreme Court level?
Yes.
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 Okay, super, thanks.
You're welcome.
Very nicely done.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very nice job.
Mm-hmm.
These are done early though. Who has something else they'd like to go through?
Hmm.
Everybody's quiet. Should we do some reading or should we, what does everybody want to do?
Maybe go back to our Corinthians study?
Do what?
The Corinthians study,
Oh, no.
chapter 15?
On the line.
Is Adriana up to that?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
I'm almost home.
Oh, okay. No worries. Don't rush. Good.
I could definitely get home by 7 so I could hook everything up, which is already hooked up and set up, so it'd be really easy. So you guys gotta hang in there.
So do we have any desire ages or something that's on your mind, Lane, that we could read?
I'm working on the notes for number 100 and 101, and if anybody wants to cover some of that, I wanted to do it for Sister Allie can't do she's not able because of all her traveling around and stuff. She wasn't able to get anything on the schedule for get set up for May.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and do those because I was already kind of working anyways on number 100, and I thought number 101 kind of flows over into it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I'm putting them both together. So
I
What was that? Last comment?
I have a
is that Brother Phil?
yes. I have a question,
Sure.
and it's regarding COVID-19, the pandemic. So I was So the one that I'm working on to present, I think May 8th, which is COVID-19. It's Elder Tessa's presentation. So she connects that with the Spanish flu of 1918. So when she's presenting it, I see the connection, I get the logic, and I believe they're connected. But well, I guess what I'm having problems seeing is Spanish flu. If I mean I don't understand it. Perhaps it's not, perhaps it's my lack of understanding, but isn't that just one witness? I mean, do we need another witness?
For COVID-19, you mean?
Right.
I'm pretty sure the other one she puts on there, if I remember right, if this is considered a witness, is I'd have to pull up my notes on it because I did that study. It was in World War, no, not World War II. It was in World War I, and one of the agreements. I'll pull up my study. I'll try to find it. And then what happened right after that, and then before the next pact that happened. And I'll try to pull it up. So, because I think that's where she was putting that. But hang on just one second.
Yeah, so I think so if I remember, the Spanish flu happened a day after the Treaty of I think Brest-Litovsk.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we also had the Battle of Raphia end right at there too. So that's what she has them lined up with, the treaty lined up with the Battle of Raphia. And then right after the treaty, right after the Battle of Raphia, right after the treaty came the Spanish flu, right after the Battle of Raphia came COVID-19.
So, yeah, so that's what I'm confused. So I guess my confusion is when we're trying to prove something, is what you're proving a second witness, or is that, because to me, in my mind, is that the Spanish flu after the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk is only one witness.
I can't answer that. I understand your question.
So why don't you use this as an opportunity to try to see if there's anything else in the other lines with Pyrrhus and World War II and everything, and see if there's another pandemic.
I'm glad you suggested that, because that's what I was thinking I should be doing. Maybe I should do that. Okay, so thank you for suggesting, because that just confirmed what I was thinking. Okay.
What I've been noticing lately is Tess puts down some really big lines and some major waymarks in history, but there are gold mines when you look into it further in more detail. There's gold mines everywhere.
Okay. I'll do that.
You may want to look at the smallpox or some of the other big pandemics that have happened.
But I would think what Adriana just said is it would have to be on one of these other lines, right?
That's what I'm thinking. The
So
Diadochi War.
Oh, I see.
Like after the battle of Gaza in here.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be some. I'm thinking it has to be after some kind of treaty.
Yeah, and this has so this is yeah, we've got two lines going on in here. I think it's been a while since I've looked at that. No, it's the same. That's all the same. Okay, it's all the same here. So this was Diadochi 3, right? And then this was
World War I.
And then this is us.
Right.
So for at least from what she's so far laid out, this would be a place to look, it would seem like then. But I know that you don't have everything in all the lines.
Right.
You bring different aspects of the lines that then tell us the aspect, what goes on in our line. And I guess because it is Spanish flu and it is COVID-19, that you would have to be looking for something similar. But I mean, would it have to be something such as a sickness?
Some kind of plague, I would think. I'm not sure.
Or something where there was a lot of death? I don't know.
Yeah, but like the bubonic plague and things like that. Anything.
The swine flu pandemic,
Yeah.
2009.
But like
H1N1 influenza virus too.
Yeah, but I still think it has to line up in this section here.
Further back in.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the bubonic plague was in the Dark Ages, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That happened in our 1260.
Yeah, in the 1260.
Yeah.
It has to line up with Raphia because that's where the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk lines up with.
Right. So yeah, let me see if I can
Well, go to those other lines. These don't have it, but couldn't you? Let me ask the Flucas family or Adriana. Couldn't you go to the other lines at everything that lines up with the Battle of Raphia and look at all of those lines? Is that what you understand? What I'm saying?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So not just this one. You could go to the Fourth Diadochi War. You could go to World War II. What else?
I think that's it.
Everything. Or the third.
Anybody hear what she said?
No.
Those Pirates lines, you can go to World War I, World War II. You can go to every single line of history that we have that has those treaties and those battles.
I heard parts of what she said.
Also, Raphia lines up with the close of probation, so the virus can be the 7 last plagues after the close of probation. That's another witness.
Could you repeat that, please? I didn't quite understand that.
So the Battle of Raphia is on close of probation. That lines up with the close of probation, Daniel 12:1 on the 144,000 line. And the 7 last plagues came after that. So this virus can be like our 7 last plagues. That's the second witness.
It's the time of trouble, Jacob's time of trouble.
Hmm. Okay.
I'm just looking up something here, and in 1830, the United States government adopted policies and made treaties with the intent of taking American Indian land, removing native nations to reservations, and forcing cultural assimilations. Then in 1831, there was the devastating smallpox epidemic that struck half of the Pawnee population, dealing with the American Indians, which was oppressing them. So that's a thought. I don't know. I'm just looking. So there was a treaty in 1831 relegating the Native Americans to reservation camps. And then 1831, that was 1830, 1831, a smallpox epidemic struck the Pawnee population, Indian reservation. So that's something that you might want to look into. It's called Before the 1833 Treaty. I don't know if that means anything.
Yeah, I think what Flucas family says that it has to line up with the close of probation there with Raphia. And can you tie those dates into a close of probation? On, waymark wise. Well, it's real quiet now. Everybody's thinking.
We are all Googling.
You're all Googling? Yeah, was somebody gonna say something?
Yeah. So that thing in 1831, we know that in the Millerites' time, 1831 was the formalization, 1831, 1833. So the formalization isn't the Battle of Raphia, not even on the 144,000 line. So I'm not sure if that can line up with the Battle of Raphia.
I'm trying to think this through. I have to see the lines in front of me to do it. But when it comes to each line, priests, Levites, Nethinims, each one of them, each period of time has an increase of knowledge and a formalization, correct?
Yes, correct.
So where does that put the Nethinims at 2019? I just don't have it in front of me. 2019 to 2021. They're in their former reign, right?
Yes, right.
So in their former reign dispensation, they would also have a increased knowledge.
Yes,
right?
formalization.
I don't know that you could put it there or not. I don't think you could, but I don't know.
Oh.
sort of thinking about.
1831 you're talking about?
Yeah, when she said 1831.
Yeah, but you will have to put that in 2020, 2021 with the formalization, which most likely wouldn't be coronavirus.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to pull this down. I don't think we need it, do we? Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Adriana wants to know when the Zoom camp meeting is. Anybody remember? Without me, I'm going to look it up. I'll look it up real quick if you don't.
I wrote it down already. It's May 22 and 23.
Perfect. I just found it. Yeah, May 22 and 23. Yeah. We can go over that real quick because I got some changes. We don't have Jackie with us tonight, right?
I do not see Jackie.
Okay, because this was still kind of tentative and I don't know how she's doing here. Donna, I'm pretty sure you're okay, right? Everybody I think is okay here. There's a chance, huh?
I'm good.
Good, we're ready for you.
Okay.
There's a chance that Sister Tony won't be able to do hers. We're not real sure. See how things go with her and with her brother. And so anything that opens up, we might just work on Bible study. Or if anybody else wants to fill in some of these spots, we got to find out from Jackie, but we definitely have this spot open here, May 29th. Yeah, and Tony has a few here. She's really needed by her brother a lot. Okay, so 22nd and 23rd. Oh, you already answered it. Sorry, Sister Christine. And Sister Susan asks about tuberculosis.
You guys see that?
Yeah.
So, this isn't the Pirate War, but this is the Battle of Raphia of Daniel 11 and 12, 11 and verse 11 and 12. So, Syracusan supporter of Pyrrhus seized power in his city. He was made ... area in the Fourth Syrian War 219 to 216 was foiled at the Battle of Raphia, but there also was a disastrous plague spread through the Greek world and ... I tried to click on it real quick, but you have to read through a whole bunch of stuff to get to where it was actually mentioning this. But I thought that this was interesting. So you might get an interesting answer. I'm going to copy this link and put it in the chat. Where's the chat?
I guess you got home.
Yeah, I did. If I were doing this while driving, that'd be very bad. But anyways, is Fel still there?
Yeah, he is. Brother Phil.
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, get that link and read through it because you might find something interesting.
Okay.
Did you follow what she said, Brother Phil? That it's the actual Battle of Raphia of Daniel 11 and 12. Is that right?
11 verses, chapter 11, verses 11 and 12. It's the
Yeah.
original Battle of Raphia that we always knew of from Uriah Smith.
Okay. So
The link is in the chat. If you go to the chat, just highlight that link and then you can copy and paste it into your internet browser and click search.
So I'm assuming the chat is in the Sacramento Fellowship?
No, right here on Zoom. Are you not able to do that? I can email it to you.
Yeah.
We're having problems with our iPad.
I will email it to you right now.
So did you see what was on that link though? Because right here, where was it? It says right here that area in the Fourth Syrian War, 219 to 216, was foiled at the Battle of Raphia, but there also was a disastrous plague spread through the Greek world. And
Yes.
so this might be fruitful.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I know that there was a lot of pestilence and plague going on in those days, and I don't think you're going to find any shortage because of how bad their hygiene was at that time. And if something broke out, they didn't have vaccines, they didn't have any kind of medicine that would stop it, they didn't know how it worked, so it would spread pretty fast. Another interesting one that I know of is Justinian's plague. Right before 538, before the seed of the beast and the 1260 started, there was a huge plague, which was an interesting. But anyways.
Okay,
Clayton.
well, we'll look this up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What were the dates on that that had it at the top?
Huh?
It had dates on the top, and I think this is broken down by dates, just trying to scroll through it, but maybe not.
Yeah, the one that I saw was 216 to 218, but I was trying to scroll through that article and I couldn't find what that thing was saying. That's why I gave up and said, here's the link. Because that's what I'll do. It said those dates, so I was trying to follow those.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was just looking at.
And the first place where I saw it, it wasn't even talking about that. So I just gave up and thought whoever has time who's looking into this can read it. And you learn a lot doing that too.
There's slavery back then.
Yep.
Virtually universal, varied in its incidence.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of going into history in detail, I found some videos because for the Friday morning devotional, I've been wanting to go into all the whole of European history because I want to understand I can't just get events and understand them. I need a lot of details for things to stick in my brain for me to be able to remember them. So I'm trying to see how Europe became the Europe we know today. So I wanted to look at the history through the whole 1260. And I found some interesting history videos if you guys are interested. I think we're just gonna watch one of those tomorrow morning in devotional, or go over it or something. I might just summarize some of what it's saying, but we have to know there's no shortage of us having to learn history in this movement, and it's gonna just keep going. We're just gonna keep having to know more and more history. And if we don't know how to explain what the 1260 looked like, how Europe and the papacy worked together or against each other, or how it happened during the 1260, it's harder to understand what it looks like now. So that's why I wanted to go into that. But that history is really interesting. I specifically wanted to see how the papacy persecuted which groups at what time. Because there was times where it persecuted the Arians or the barbarians or the Mohammedans or the Protestants, whatever there was. It had different groups that it was persecuting at different times, so I thought it was interesting. Anyways, I'll post those somewhere at some time. Oh, that sounds good. So did you guys want to do some Corinthians? Or are the brains fried? My mom and I were talking, listening to Parminder over there in Portugal. We're like, man, their brains are really fried with him. Like he just, he won't let up.
I know, I noticed that.
Question after question.
I know.
But he's preparing them, and it would be nice if we could have that. He's preparing them because we're not going to have friends asking us questions when we're in the middle of trying to spread our message. Satan's going to rile up every kind of adversity we can face. And it's going to be people screaming and yelling at us, and we have to stay calm and smiling and explain without frustration. And it's not easy.
He makes it look so easy, huh?
Yeah. It's...
He's so good.
All right. So you guys want to do the Corinthian study?
I'm up for it.
Yeah.
Everybody just got distracted with Googling the pandemics and the plagues.
All right. We can resume Googling after the study's over. So, what did we do last time? We did, that's right. So we did some parable stuff, if you guys remember. We had some repeat and enlarges. And
verse 20.
we still have verse 20 to look at. So we did the if then that Debbie showed us, which was really interesting. Then we had this, repeat and enlarge, and mirror and chiasm. We had that going on up here. If you guys remember, we're looking at all of that and the grace issue. So there was a lot. I'm not gonna get into the details of all of it. But Paul is starting to get into the thick of the point here, because the point he was making was that your faith is in vain if you don't believe in the resurrection of Christ, because everything revolves around that one single point. So if you say you're a Christian, but you don't believe in the resurrection of Christ, then you can't say you're a Christian, because to be a Christian, you have to believe in the resurrection, because if you don't, there's no hope. And if there's no hope, then why are you here? So that's what that was talking about. So verse 15, chapter 15, verse 20, but now is Christ risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that slept. I don't remember. What did we say then? Mom.
We said that Christ is the only one that's the first fruit because he died for us. And he was
The only one who's first fruits, or the first one who's first fruits?
He is the first fruit. The first fruit is the first one. The reason from the dead. Isn't that what it says?
Yeah.
And we said that how come? Because Moses.
So it's not that he's the only first fruits, because we're also supposed to be first fruits.
Yes, but he's the first one.
Okay.
Because he died for us. Moses did not die for us. And I think 1 Peter 1:3 is the one that explains.
But who said Moses was a first fruit?
No.
We talked about that last time, because what the verse says is that he was the first fruits of them that slept. So they were those that went to the grave. But Moses went to the grave as well.
But why is it that death for sins is what makes you a first fruit?
I didn't say that. Did she say
No, I'm talking to my mom.
Well, he died for us.
He died for us.
He resurrected by his own power.
And he resurrected by his own power.
Moses died and he was resurrected by God. It was nothing in him to...
Yeah, but why does that mean that you're the first fruit?
And remember, Moses had sin. So his resurrection was the second resurrection. It wasn't Jesus died and resurrected, but he had no sin. He is a type of the...
I still feel like there's a connection missing, because you can say all that and that's nice, but how does that translate into the first fruit has to be this kind of situation where you die for sin and then you're resurrected from your own power, da, 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 da. Do you know what I mean?
Well, think about the first fruit that was picked.
Come sit here so everyone, because it sounds like I'm talking, but
My
it,
back is hurting really bad. I can't see.
but it sounds like I'm talking to myself. Okay, what were you
So
saying?
what was the first fruit that was brought at the sanctuary?
Of the barley?
Yeah, so it was the first blade of the barley coming out, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the spring.
Is she far enough away to log in on her phone so when she talks we hear her?
No, it'll start echoing where she's at. She's on the couches. So my question, I don't understand what she's saying.
You
but-
can look in Ellen White to see what she said.
So basically, we've arrived at the idea that to understand first fruits, you'd have to go back to Leviticus and everywhere where it says what the first fruits are, like to bring into the temple and all of that, to understand it better. And I feel like that study was done in this movement a while ago when we figured out about the first fruits. So I don't know.
That was all types. They were typifying of him.
She says that they were all types typifying of him. Okay, that makes more sense. I'm gonna put that in.
Say
All.
that again?
So because we're talking about the barley, the first fruits, the first blade that came in, they were to take the first fruits and bring them as an offering to the temple. But all temple stuff was typifying Christ. Am I spelling this right?
So read First Peter 1:3. Read that verse.
Can you guys hear me? Am I cutting out?
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Elaine. Perfect.
Can you not hear us?
No, it got quiet for a second and I thought someone got caught off and I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
What book is this, Elaine? Leviticus? Or
Hang on one second, I got my printer going at the same time. It is Exodus 23.
Exodus?
Blessed be the God.
It's not the first mention. The first mention is right before it, a couple verses before. And the feast of harvest, the first fruits of thy labors, which thou hast sown in the field, and the feast of ingathering, which is in the end of the year, when thou hast gathered in thy labors out of thy field. So the first of the first fruits. So it was saying that there's.
Can you put that in chat?
Yeah, because.
That's important. Mom, what's your verse again? First Peter
1:3.
1:3. Okay. I'll put that
I'm
in.
trying to leave my mic off.
I can't hear when your mic is on. I can't hear the printer in the background, so you're good.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, you're fine. At least I can't.
It'll be done in a few minutes.
What chapter is that again?
It's Exodus 23.
It's up here.
So the Feast of Harvest, if I'm understanding that, and the Feast of Harvest, comma, the first fruit of thy labors. So the Feast of Harvest is the first fruit of your labors. Is that how I'm reading that?
So harvest is at the end of a dispensation, isn't it?
Correct.
So the first fruits are at harvest.
Of thy labors.
Yeah, and the feast of harvest, the first fruits of thy labors, which thou hast sown in the field, and the feast of ingathering, which is in the end of the year. Thou hast gathered in thy labors out of the field, the first of the fruits of thy land, thou shalt bring into the house of the Lord thy God. Oh, because, right? The first fruits aren't for the general public. The first fruits are to be kept in the temple, and the priests are going to be in the temple working. Right? And Christ is going to be in the temple. So the first fruits are not for anyone else's use except for God and the temple.
Right.
So that's why, I never realized that before, but first fruits go to temple.
But
Lord.
what does that second phrase there lumped into that looks like it's out of place and it's there for a reason? Thou shalt not see the kid in his mother's milk.
I don't know, but it's not, I think it goes into something else later on in the chapter, right? Because
Okay.
it's in a huge list of things they need to do, but we're just looking at the first fruits. So Christ was an offering, and the priests are an offering then too. So you know how when Joshua and Israel finally went into Canaan to take it over and they split up the land, the Levites weren't supposed to have any of their own land. They were in each city just taking care of the temple and all of the providences. So I knew this for a long time. The priests don't have any possession, like any real physical. They might have a house somewhere, but they don't have any rights to the land because their whole work isn't to farm. It's not to work the land. It's not to gain territory. Their whole work is to officiate in the temple all day long.
They had land which they could not buy. It was forever.
Did they?
Yeah.
But their work was in the temple, wasn't it?
They would have horses. They would work for a month or whatever, and then another.
Okay. So I was wrong about that, but they still are the ones that stay and work at the temple. Why isn't it giving me a cop? What? No, I don't want.
I don't think that's out of place, but we don't have to look at it now. But it's in Exodus 34 as well, and it does go on to something else. It kind of gives that list and then it moves on to something else.
Yeah, but this doesn't have anything to do with the first fruits.
Well, what I'm saying is it's there for a reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah, everything is, it has a meaning, but it's not. Just because it changes subject in the middle of the verse, I don't think it belongs to the first fruits. Does it?
I don't know that it belongs to the first fruits, but it must have something to do with the same point or time, is what I'm thinking. I don't know.
Okay. So I like this though, that it's in the time at the Feast of Harvest. So now I want to know about the Feast of Harvest. Let me to search. Three times thou shalt keep a feast unto me in the year. Thou shalt keep the feast of unleavened bread. Thou shalt eat unleavened bread 7 days, as I command thee, in the time appointed of the month Abib. For in it thou camest out from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty. And the feast of harvest, the first fruits of thy labors, 3 times in the year, males before me. Thou shalt not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leavened bread, neither shall the fat of my sacrifice remain until the morning. The first of the first fruits of thy land thou shalt bring into the house of the Lord. Behold, I send an angel before thee to keep thee in the way and to bring thee into the place which I have. I wonder if it's under Feast of First Fruits. Would that be a thing?
The slaying of the Passover lamb was a shadow of the death of Christ, says Paul. Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. The sheep of first fruits, which at the time of the Passover was weighed before the Lord, was typical of the resurrection of Christ.
Why is that not interesting? Yeah, Susan, I remember we were baptized last year during the Feast of the First Fruits. I remember. That was awesome. So I feel like I'm going to go way off topic. So I'm going to come back to this. Does anyone else see anything they want to point out or?
No, and you were looking for Feast of Harvest, right? There's only one hit, and it's the same one that I already put in the chat.
Yeah, I found that. Saudi.
You have to back up and look at what because it's talking about the three feasts. Feast of Unleavened Bread.
It didn't have anything in there. I read through it already. I thought I read it out loud though.
Oh, maybe you did. I was reading too. I can't listen to somebody else read while I'm trying to read. So I probably missed it.
It's okay. I do the same thing. Whoa, no, I didn't need to do that.
But he is the first fruits of them that slept. Did we look at it that way? Of them that slept.
Yeah, that's why I was confused because Moses slept.
I know. We talked about that last time.
Whoa, oh, there it is.
Christ in his sanctuary,
Yeah, what? Scream louder.
1 Corinthians 15:20. And it says, and as the antitype of the way sheep, our Lord was raised from the dead on the third day, the first fruit of them that slept. A sample of all the resurrected just, whose vile body shall be changed and fashioned like unto his glorious body.
Tell me where is that? Did you
Christ
just?
in his sanctuary, 83.1.
Christ in his sanctuary, 83.1. I'm also going to bring in this from Acts of the Apostles.
What's a vile body?
The human vile body. What do you mean what's a vile body?
So he represents people that will be changed in the same fashion like him.
Christ in his
Glorious bodies.
sanctuary. Can you read that? Let me just search vile bodies. All come from their graves, the same, but Christ came to restore that which had been lost. He will change our vile bodies and fashion them like unto his glorious body. The mortal, corruptible form, devoid of comeliness, once polluted with sin, becomes perfect, beautiful, and immortal. Ooh! I'm going to bring this and let's read this because this is really interesting with the study of the body that we're trying to do here. Because that's our main goal, and this first fruits business seems to be tying into it in an interesting way. So, all come forth from their graves the same in stature as when they entered the tomb. Adam, who stands among the risen throng, is of lofty height and majestic form, in stature but little below the Son of God. He presents a marked contrast to the people of later generations. In this one respect is shown the great degeneracy of the race, but all arise with the freshness and vigor of eternal youth. In the beginning, man was created in the likeness of God, not only in character, but in form and feature. I'm going to put character, form, and feature. So we've been dealing with character. That's been nature of man part 1 has been character. But form and feature is nature of man part 2, right? So sin defaced and almost obliterated the divine image, but Christ came to restore that which had been lost. He will change our vile bodies and fashion them like unto his glorious body. The mortal, corruptible form, devoid of comeliness, once polluted with sin, becomes perfect, beautiful, and immortal. All blemishes and deformities are left in the grave, restored to the tree of life and the long lost Eden. So this word corruptible, we need to look into that word. Because I want to know.
Because the mortal takes off the corruption and puts on incorruptibility.
Yeah, Paul talks about that incorruptible, and Ellen White talks about it. So I'm going to look at the Noah Webster and see what it's saying. Corruptible. I'm going to bring in all of these things. This is a lot, but I want to really one who corrupts.
So it becomes incorruptible. Mortal corruptible form becomes incorruptible.
Okay, so I'm just going to highlight because I brought all the words, not all of them. There's still a couple that aren't in here. So first is corruptible. That may be corrupted. That may become putrid, subject to decay and destruction. Our bodies are corruptible. That may be vitiated in qualities or principles. What's that word?
So he is the first fruit because his body didn't see corruption.
In Genesis, the first mention of corruptible or corrupt is tied to violence.
Depraved, rendered impure, rendered defective and void. Can you post it in chat?
It's there. Genesis 6:11 and 12. It's in chat right now.
Why did it do that? Hang on. Hang on. Hold on. Okay. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. So I want to go back to that. What was before that? What was before this verse? What was it talking about? because it says the earth also. So it's like in a list of things, right?
The verse right before it, 6:10, and Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Oh, that's okay. So this is after the, ow, hold on, ow. So it's after the flood. So all the bad stuff was washed away, but it says the earth.
Before the flood.
What?
Before the flood, because his 3 sons went through the flood with him.
Oh, so this is before okay.
Right.
So this is also talking about a resurrection of earth.
Yeah, right. Good point.
Okay. Good. I think this is a really rich trove right here, this word corruptible, because it seems to be important when it comes to death and resurrection. So that may be vitiated. Vitiated means depraved, rendered impure, rendered defective, and void in qualities or principles, susceptible of depravation, manners, or are corruptible by evil example. Corruptible, that which may decay and perish, the human body, this corruptible must put on incorruption. Oh, no, Webster's referring back to 1 Corinthians. Corruptibleness, susceptibility of corruption, corruptibility of corruption. This was the interesting one. This is corruption, the main root word of it all. The act of corrupting or state of being corrupt or putrid, the destruction of the natural form of bodies by the separation of the component parts, or by the disorganization and the process of putrefaction, thou wilt not suffer thy Holy One to see corruption. Okay, putrid matter.
So it seems to link strictly to what happens in the grave, right? Is that what I'm seeing?
Yeah. But
Yeah.
this same chapter, if we look at verse 53, it using the parable method, you can see what corruptible means. Verse 53.
I don't know if I want to jump there yet.
It's very simple and it tells you what corruptible is.
Okay, my mom says skip down to verse 53.
That's a big jump.
I know, and she is making me do it. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality.
What's corruptible?
Mortal.
There you go.
So by a repeat and enlarge, you have, corruptible to incorruption, and you have mortal to immortality. So if you do A, B, A, B.
So to go back to the first mention of corrupt, which is Genesis 6:11 and 12, and it talks about violence. To go to the verse to put on incorruption would be to be without violence.
So you could do the same thing. Earth, corrupt, earth full of violence. So you can have A, B, come back, A, B. So we've defined corruption. All of that work for one word.
But you know, Adriana, go back to Genesis 6:11 and 12 for a sec. because what Christine was saying works perfectly as well. Repeat and enlarge. Verse 11, and the earth was filled with violence, matches up with all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. So in God's eyes, the earth being filled with violence equates also with all of humanity corrupting our ways upon the earth. And that's a lot broader a thing. You know, violence is a little more limited, but all flesh corrupting his way upon the earth opens it up to what God sees as violence.
His way, corrupting his way.
That's right.
Exactly. Nice, thank you.
I kind of, you moved really fast, but when you were down in those other verses, 53 and 54, I think you had a similar thing between the two verses. I didn't get a chance to look at it.
Well, in this whole area, he goes through corruption and incorruption a lot.
Okay.
So you see it here and here and here and everywhere.
Yeah, it's good to go study because it's gonna be next.
Yeah, so it's good to have that understanding now, so that way when we get there, we'll know better. But I like this. This first mention is pretty powerful right here. So violence is violence you think of in a physical way. It is still destruction of the body. So it's not just death and decay, it's also any kind of hurting of the human form.
Well, and then also, you know, like if we're going to talk, we remember what Jesus said about murder and your thoughts, right? It comes first in your mind. So if you've thought it, you're already guilty of it. So even if you're not physically killing somebody violent, you're doing it in your mind.
Disease.
And
Yeah.
that's
You can follow that word violence many times in the Bible as well, where it talks about them, like the pastors and such doing violence, and the violence that they're doing is in the corrupting of his way.
right.
Because it's violence to teach contrary to his way. You're doing violence that brings death to people.
Right.
And you know, if you expand it out into, obviously the Eden plan included health reform. The earth was filled with violence. Some of that violence was directed against animals because they were hunting and killing and eating meat.
Right.
And all flesh corrupting his way upon the earth. You know, Sister White's clear that the animal propensities are stirred up by eating a diet that God never intended.
Right.
And so on. So, you know, it encompasses a lot. Adriana, just a quick thought. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe your designation there for Genesis 6, 11, and 12, AB.
Yeah.
I think the second one, like it's A with the little, foot symbol, like, I mean, we can use it as an apostrophe, like A prime, E prime, because I think it's meaning it's not exactly the same. I mean, earth and earth obviously are the same words, but
You mean like
it's repeating it. It's repeating it, like in parables and in chiasms and so on. I think that's
So
how
we'll do A, B, and then A to the power of 2 and B to the power.
No, I think it actually is generally just in literary circles and so on. I think it's done as a little foot symbol, like A prime, the apostrophe on the keyboard. It would be the apostrophe. Okay, you're not typing it. No, not an apostrophe like that. It would be the symbol for foot, like 2 feet, the little dash up above.
Oh, like a
superscript,
quote, like a quote.
like a quote. Yeah, like a quote.
Oh, you know literature stuff, and I am gonna tell you right now, I have no idea. I was always really bad at grammar. So
No,
just
not the double one, just a
Single
single.
one.
So that's inches. So the other one is just the single one. Super. That's it. Yeah.
so what does this mean? I want to know because I'm learning here. What's a prime? What is that?
It's just indicating I mean, that's how it's said, A prime, B prime.
So it's
Like
just like a second
A
set.
prime, B prime. But it's just meaning more like what we would say repeat and enlarge.
Oh,
It's giving
More
an
definition.
expansion on a metaphor, or whatever it happens to be. In this case, we're talking parables. But
so if I said, so it's kind of like I said blue, pink, and then I said like Prussian, and then fuchsia. Right? It's not the same word. It's a different word, but it's just the same kind of blue, but
it's repeating. That's it. It's repeating the concept, and maybe in a different detail, or a different, but they equate equally. Like A is equal to A prime, B is equal to B prime. But it doesn't have to be exactly the same kind of thing.
I get it.
If you want to really, just a quick little factoid that'll take it off topic for a second, but
Go for it.
the little symbol you put for the A and the B prime, the little foot symbol,
I didn't know that was a foot.
is actually also time, but it's also distance. Because if you look at your longitude and so on.
Oh yeah, they have it. But
yes, you think of GPS with the coordinates and so on. If you're doing your GPS on coordinates, the longitude and latitude and so on, it actually will use those symbols, the foot symbol and the inches symbol, but it's actually minutes and seconds. Like the foot is called minutes, and because it might be whatever 149 degrees 36 minutes, but it'll use that little foot symbol, and 30 seconds, but it'll use the inches symbol, and that's what it means. And it's because people who are born, their mom and dad are driving rapidly to the hospital, but they live way out on a rural road and so on, and a child ends up getting born, delivered by the dad in the vehicle and so on their birth certificate, it actually will give the coordinates of the literal birthplace where that child was born. And that's it. It's been interesting with our emphasis on time in our dispensation, for it equates actually to land, to distance, and to
so that's why it's called a
time,
foot.
actual time.
So that's why it's called a foot, because you walk the distance.
It is the symbol for foot, but it actually is called minute. In that kind of, in latitude and longitude, it's actually referred to as minute, and then seconds, as opposed to foot and inches. But yeah, you're on the right track.
So if I wanted
to divert it, that was just an interesting little factor.
So if I have another AB in another verse, then do I put double feet? You hear me?
I heard you. I don't know the answer to that. I don't believe you do double.
Because you want to differentiate it further, right? So wouldn't you?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know the answer to that. That would be a way we could use it to designate it. But sorry,
I know the answer. It's okay. So that's an interesting tidbit, because I did wonder why that was there. really quick though, so what we figured out was corruptible means death and decay, but it can also mean while you're alive, hurt or disease or violence. Anything that can attack or hurt or change the human body in a negative way. Anything at all, that's corruption. So what incorruptible is, what immortality is, let me put mortality. It's you can never die, you can never decay, you can never get hurt even, you can never get sick even, you can never get messed up in any way at all. It will be impossible. So every bad thing that happens to the body now, what does that mean about the digestive tract? Does that mean no bathroom in heaven? Because that'd be great.
I hope that so much.
I always wondered, I'm like, can we do this so that it's so efficient that that never happens?
Right?
Well, my granddaughter, who is 5 years old, just asked that same question.
I know. I'm 5 years old in my heart. I feel it. Oh, but I know I'm not the only one who's always wondered this. So
No, I think we've all probably thought things like that.
yeah. So anyways, oh, my mom says we're just gonna eat once a month, so it's not any problem.
Well, we'll definitely digest everything, so there probably won't be any waste produced in the body. So
Yeah,
no
that's what,
elimination needed.
Everything would be good and pure. The whole purpose of that is to eliminate the waste. So if everything is being used as it was meant to be, it would seem like maybe that's an interesting thought. You know what I mean? Because everything would do its part in nourishing the body.
yeah, that's the other question, because food has to undergo decay and break down in your digestive system. And if food, because in heaven, nothing is corruptible. Nothing is able to get hurt or destroyed or broken down or anything. Everything is living. So whatever we eat, it's going to become a part of us completely. And that's where the life sustaining thing comes from. That's why that fruit that we eat once a month, from the tree of life, sustains us, right? So that's pretty interesting.
It would go through and do the work it was intended to do in the body.
Yeah. Praise the Lord. I hope that we're on the right track with that one. So then that means that we have to have sleep for this body to be restored and heal the damage it incurred during the day. But since this body doesn't get damaged, that's why we don't need sleep. That's why there's no night there. Right?
Right. So there would be no need for it.
Yeah, because the whole purpose of sleep is to have your body heal itself from the damage it incurred during the day. And if there's no damage, there's no need to repair, because your body is incorruptible and immortal.
I thought I was going to heaven to rest. No, I'm just kidding.
No, we're going to go there to learn a lot more history, and Parminder's going to still be there, and he's not going to let us get away easy.
No, I know. I just remember when my mom was alive a long time ago, she said, "You're going to take that computer with you to your grave." And I said, "I'm going to rest in my grave. I'm not going to work."
Oh, man. Yeah, well, that's not how it works. If we're one of the 144,000, we never see that day.
No, and it won't be a problem, because it'll be totally different. So it's not going to be a problem. We have to look at it, and actually the notes that I'm working on for the presentations that I'm going to do, we have to look at it as comparing. You can't. This whole life is a parable to the heavenly. So we can't compare the two. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the whole. But everything that happened on this planet, everything that we see around us, we have to divide it in the right way and the wrong way, because we have too many examples all around us that it's hard for our head to grasp what perfection and what God intended for us to look like. because all we see is death, decay, disease, and problems, and violence, and everything. So it's so hard for our minds to come out of that. But because we had that experience on this earth, when we go to the other planets to tell the other, you know, beings there, we can explain it better. For them, it's the opposite. For them, it's impossible for them to imagine what on earth of violence and corruption and disease and hurt, what all of that is. So how do you explain that to them, how evil sin is? You know what I mean? Because for them, they can't even imagine. They've never seen anything like that.
Who
They just
are you
hear
talking about that
stories.
hasn't seen anything like that?
Huh?
Who are you talking about that hasn't seen anything like that?
The beings, they hear stories, but I don't think they have a telescope. But the angels go and tell them things. That's why you have Ellen White and the
Oh,
angels.
okay. Because I thought you were talking about the angels. I thought, what did I miss? Because they see what we endure.
No, I said the beings on the other planets.
Okay.
Because they live in a earth or in a planet that has never seen death or corruption.
Yeah, so Susan put in there, don't you think the whole universe is watching, and they would be part of the universe? Because this is a theater of the universe.
Yeah, but the way it's, like I said, do you think that they have a telescope and they're zooming in with their eyes? I think that the way they learn is by the angels who go there and tell them what things are like, because that's what Ellen White was doing. That's why Enoch was there in her vision. Do you know what I mean? So they only learn what it's like from the people who bring messages to them of what it's like. And the whole universe knows the controversy that's happening, right? Have I lost you guys? Because we remember how Parminder keeps saying we have some really magical ideas of what we think is happening in heaven.
Right.
So the whole way that God has his government working is this person has information and they give that information to you in the form of a message, and then that person passes it on. So that's how I thought it works. But if I'm wrong, that's fine too. I don't mind.
Well, if by God's grace we make it there, we'll be learning all these things.
Hold on, I have two people talking to me at this. What was that, Elaine?
I said, by God's grace, if we make it there, we'll be learning those things. And Susan put that she thinks that they are witnessing this.
That's always been my understanding as well. But I mean, I definitely can stand corrected. But
Because it is,
you know, the whole universe is watching this petri dish of sin that the earth is. And remember, they haven't ever fallen, so they've got, you know, powers beyond our sinful condition and so on. I mean, I sort of, and as Suzanne said, I mean, this is the theater for the whole universe.
Yeah.
But
so then
we
why
still have
would
experience. We still have an experience that through the eons of eternity is going to be shared, and no one's ever going to get tired of it and so on. Just
but
like
if they're watching us right now, then they already know everything we're learning, all the lines, all the equality, all our explanations for it. Do you know what I'm saying? If they are watching, physically seeing everything that's happening, then they're watching this unfold. They already know our lines. They know our message. They know how it's been opening up. They know all of the history and they remember it because they have perfect brains. And then what are we going to teach them?
well, I think you're
Brianna,
talking
it's
about
an
two different,
experience. It's
you're
an
talking about,
experience. It's not just head knowledge or anything.
you're talking about two different things though, because if you're talking about the other beings on the other planets, we're going to be teaching for sure the people that were on this planet that go to heaven. But does that mean we teach the people that were already in heaven? That were already in the beings that you're talking about that are on other planets? Because there's a difference, you know what I'm saying?
Well, we can play a movie for the ones who are here.
We can do what?
Can't we play a movie? I mean, isn't that what would be happening on the other planets? They're watching via a spiritual television. Like, you know what I'm saying? I feel like I'm not explaining why I'm confused about this, right? So I'm just going to leave it because I'm probably wrong. I know there's Ellen White quotes where she talks about it, so I'm just going to try to find them and see where I'm going wrong here. Sorry. I feel like I'm wasting your guys' time.
No, never.
You don't have to apologize. We were all going along with it.
Again, though, just not to belabor anything, but Adrienne, I think in some ways what you were saying as well, you know, we are going to have an experience, just having been human. I'm not now dividing it into priests, Levites, Nethinim experiences. I'm just meaning the human experience, having lived on a planet, the only planet in God's universe that has had sin.
Mhm.
And so there's going to be a sharing. You know what it's like when you hear somebody talking and giving their testimony or things like that. And so there's going to be a heightening of appreciation for God and his plan of redemption that isn't experienced by unfallen beings, you know, if they're watching, quote unquote, a video of it all play out. You know, I mean, you think of any of us watching not that we do now, but I mean, you know, watching a movie or this or that, we can enter into it some, but it's not anything the same as sitting down one-on-one with somebody who's gone through an actual experience and so on. And anyway, you know, we probably need to dispense with this train of because it is, as Elaine put it, you know, by God's grace, we'll participate in what happens, you know, and how it's all done.
We'll know when we're there. Some
Yeah.
things we won't know until we're there.
Yeah. So we're at 8 o'clock. I think this is a good spot to close because this is a good idea to think on this because this is a really interesting. This is the nature of man part 2. This is it, right?
Well, it's part of it, that's for sure.
Yeah. So the body.
That's not necessarily. I don't know that that's necessarily anything we did not already know, though.
Yeah, I understand, but there's definitely part of it, and it's probably a really important part. So maybe there are things that we do that we don't realize decay the body. Because somehow it connects, and I think Susan put this here, because the nature of man part 1 has an effect on the body. They're both connected, so you also have to think about them in that way. And Susan also, in tandem with something Christine had said earlier, the corrupt thought becomes a corrupt action, which results in violence. Violence can be a destructive force or a clashing and discordance, which Parminder's been going over recently too, that every thought becomes an action, which is nature of man part 1, but then it has an effect on the body, which is nature of man part 2. So anyways, does anyone else have anything else to say? I thought this was pretty interesting. I really liked this.
Yeah, this was good.
And we're getting better. So we were able to stay within verses and figure out from the verses, just based off of the whole repeat and enlarge, what corruptible and non-corruptible means. And we also can find, you know, supportive information and, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we are getting better at it.
Could you move it back over to the original verse that we were looking at for me? Okay, because that's what I thought. Corruptible wasn't in that verse.
How did we get to
Your mom.
Yeah, no, so it was this first fruits.
Okay. Oh, okay.
This Ellen White quote, and she went back to corruptible and incorruptible, and
Okay.
Christ is the first fruit. That's,
I was just trying to trace our steps and rewind.
I totally forgot. Good catch, though.
Go back to the verse because it talks about those who sleep. Well, you kind of have to like add words that aren't there. Well, what happens when a person's sleeping? They're in the grave, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Those
So
that
it is
slept.
implied.
Well, let's see, from the dead become the first fruits of them that slept. But this is an interesting thing because it still goes back to the fact that he slept in the grave, but he didn't see corruption.
And that's where we come in with our compare and contrast, and
And maybe that's where you have the distinction with Moses, because Moses would have seen corruption, right?
right.
Death itself is part of the corruption. So how does that mean? What does that mean that he didn't see corruption?
I don't know if it has to do with how long you're in there, but David talks about that, and it's in the Psalms and it's in the prophecies that he did not see corruption.
I'm not saying that it didn't. I'm just saying we might find something interesting there. But death itself means perished. Perishable means corruption.
I
So
mean, sleep.
death itself is part of the corruption.
Well, like there's a couple things there. Like, okay, so he wasn't in the grave long enough for the body to start to decay, because I think that happens after 3 or 4 days. I forget exactly. But also, after how many minutes or seconds can you be dead before your brain starts to die?
Like 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes tops.
It's not long, right? Yeah, before you start having mental issues.
So that's what I'm saying, is that three days is plenty of time for things to stop working. And the whole point of incorruptible means immortal, which means not able to die. So death is just the process of the moment that you die is part of corruption.
Right.
So,
well,
hang on, wait, just let me finish that thought, because death can only happen, it's a result of sin, and corruption is a result of sin, but he was sinless.
That's what I was going to say, because he did not sin and his body did not see corruption. He went to sleep. I don't know. I mean, there's a difference there, and it sounds like maybe I'm misunderstanding. It sounds like you're saying that he saw corruption.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that something else is happening here that we could learn.
Right. We might need to go to that verse that you're talking about, that he didn't see corruption, and figure out what that means.
Yeah, because I'm wondering if there's a cool relation between the fact that he didn't sin and what that actually means for the body to not see corruption. There might be something interesting.
There might be, yeah.
Right.
Because those are two things that he had well, if you're looking at Moses, that Moses didn't. And I just say Moses because Moses was resurrected, but Christ was sinless. So there must be some sort of relation between that, and because the Bible defines death as sleep.
I'm wondering if we need to we'll have to go into that verse, but actually check out the Hebrew word. Maybe there's something different, that it wasn't translated exactly. You know what I'm saying? Maybe there's more to it.
I think we need to come back to this.
Definitely. I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so much more in this verse that we're not getting, because we know that the dead equates to corruption, yet at the same time we know that he did not corrupt, and therefore he became the first fruits of them that slept. He should have been corrupt, but because he wasn't corrupt, he became the first fruit.
Exactly.
And how do you fit into that as well? He didn't sin, but he bore the sins of the world.
Whoa.
Exactly, because I think that's what I said. There's more to this verse, because he took our sin, and therefore when we arise incorruptible, because he took that part of us unto himself and yet was uncorrupted, and therefore we don't have that in us anymore. We don't have that corruption anymore because it was on him.
My mom also said a minute ago that he was born with a corrupt body just like everyone else on this planet, where his character was perfect, but his body was the degenerated body that had been passed down through generations.
Right.
So.
But no sin.
Right. Born.
Because he was resurrected in a resurrected body. How do you say that? Yes, because the whole chapter is going to talk about this.
Well, good, because this is a fascinating topic.
I know, but it's part of the nature.
That doesn't mean we can't study it. What do you mean by?
Yeah, sure. Why not? No, it's difficult.
We shouldn't be afraid of difficult.
So we'll pick back up here then on Sabbath at this same verse.
Yeah, and then you have Enoch too, which.
Yeah, Susan put that in there.
But Enoch did not die.
Well, that would be Elijah as well, because Elijah was taken up to heaven too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Elijah, and then Christ, and 144,000. So.
Put Moses too.
So these are all the people who we know that either got resurrected or are going to be translated, and also all saints. Oh yeah, Lazarus.
Maybe just leave it with that box with just those that are translated and have a separate box perhaps to keep it separate.
Okay, so we'll
keep a focus on the ones that are translated.
Translated Enoch,
Elijah,
and 144. We'll just bold that. No, that's not enough. Okay, and now we're gonna go to resurrected was Moses, Christ, Lazarus. Well, I'm gonna put Christ plus others.
Yeah.
Because there were others taken with him.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna put all saints at the end of the world.
You guys know when the others were resurrected with Christ, did they go to heaven with him, or did they die again?
They didn't die again, but I don't think they stayed on earth to roam around. I think they went up to heaven with Christ.
Okay, thanks.
It was like a sheep. I would say that. Counts no.
Oh, my mom is saying it was like a sheath, because you don't just have one string of barley when you take to temple. It was a group of wheat or whatever fruit you had. Those multiple first fruits. So
if you're one of the saints that were risen with him, that would be really mean to come back and have to be here and go die again.
Yeah, no, he didn't do that. I think there's an Ellen White quote, or no, I thought it was in the Bible. It says he was caught up with the angels, and then the others and they all went to heaven. It was either in the Bible or in Ellen White. I'm pretty sure this is clarified somewhere. Anyways, so Friday night we're gonna do this again, right?
Didn't we say somebody's already on Friday night? Friday. I'm looking at the schedule, April.
So we're gonna start doing the School of the Prophets.
If they're still there, that's the Flucas family on Friday.
Okay, so we're gonna start the School of the Prophet thing on one of the weekly night things after the people who already signed up do their presentations, right?
I have it right here. We may need to fill in a couple spots depending on what happens with Tony here. So definitely Sabbath afternoon. Always.
Right, but so the people who are signed up already, we're just gonna let them present as usual.
Right.
And Wednesday nights are gonna be the presenting ones and Friday nights the study, right? Because that's when I'm for sure home and we can.
We'll work that out. We'll work that out. But for now, we need to finish what we have here.
Okay, that's fine.
But we'll fill in like, because see, this is a Friday that Tony's on. We may need to fill right in there anyways. There's a Friday that's open.
And so on those Fridays that are already open, if
I'll put parable study. What were you gonna say? Sorry, Christine.
I was gonna say the same thing.
Okay. I'll fill these ones that are open for sure with parable study.
Okie doke, awesome. Who
And
wants to pray?
and I'll talk to Tony. These are both Wednesdays here though. So
Which one's a Wednesday?
huh?
I might try to take one. Which ones do you need?
That's May 20th and May 27th. I mean, we're not positive, but you could talk to her about it. I know that she's kind of struggles being the only one taking care of her brother. No break. She needs a lot of prayer.
Yeah, I can try for the 27th. I'll ask her.
Okay, and then get back to me and I'll update the schedule.
All right.
And I'm just going to fill these ones in with Bible study. We'll just put Bible study. Because we'll be in 1 Corinthians 15 for a while, but we might move on. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you guys already talk about that thing we talked about? To how going forward, how we might want to try to present the presentation part?
Less of their words and more of our own words kind of thing. Is that what I was getting out of that?
Yeah, so for going forward, we've been doing transcribing for a while and it's really nice and it's helped us a lot. But we gotta step it up to the next level. Those of us who feel really comfortable with transcribing, we can practice, and it's not a big step forward, but it does cause you to think a little bit more when you're getting the notes ready. Instead of just transcribing and copying everything else down, try to understand the subject really well and then explain it again in your own words and then present that.
I'll do my best.
I
feel so weak in for years I was able to just sit down and come out with Bible studies and the Lord would lead me here and this verse would lead me there and then to there and then to there, and for some reason or other that just is not the way it is now.
So this is why I'm saying, because when you start doing it this way, it actually, you think about it and you're like, wait, this kind of makes me think of that. And then it makes you branch, not even it makes you, it just brings out the curiosity in you and you start to go different places. Like, especially in Tessa's studies, you'll wonder about this section of history or that section, and you can go in and get little tidbits here and there, and it cements the information in your head in a way that you can't even.
Yeah, it does.
And it helps you understand how to try to put a presentation together, because the whole thing we're going to do when we go to the Levites, we're not going to bring them transcribed videos. We're going to be there to try to explain to them what it is and try to answer their questions. So it helps us to be able to do that more. And it's a little baby step towards that direction. We're not really, it's still hard to put our own studies together, but it's easy to just, like you would in school, take notes during a video, try to understand what the point of the study was, and then try to re-explain it yourself. It's still using the video, so it's fine. It's maybe more time.
Yes, I agree with that because this is what Elder Parminder, I think, is always trying to emphasize in his class. Says, don't read the Bible, don't read the Spirit of Prophecy, paraphrase in your own words, because he said anybody can read the Bible, anybody can read what is written, but when you paraphrase it, it gives you an understanding of what it is that you just read.
Yeah, because you can read it and say, ha, there it is. But then if someone has you try to say it in your own words, you're like, wait, how would I explain this concept in my own words? And it makes you, it's like, wait a minute, what actually is this concept? Because I don't know that I fully understand it to explain it. And then you're like, wait a minute, I never thought about this before. And I'm telling you, your study is going to go insanely amazing, because you're all of a sudden going to have this hunger for and thirst for knowledge like you never did before. It's really, and even we're stepping up in blessings. Just think of it that way.
Okay, yeah. If we're finished with this study, I have a personal question. Can we take just a few minutes?
Okay.
What's your question?
Okay, so we're in a market for a new computer. Both of our computers are quite old. And so we're just asking, what does everybody have out there? Do some of you have Macs? Do some of you have just PCs? And what are some of the things that, there's things about like Generation 8 and the speed and the RAM and all of that. So I guess basically what I'm asking is, what do we all have to, in order for us to do what we're doing now, like making lines and all of that?
If you want, I can hook you up with the guy that I always get my computers from.
Just wait just a second. Before we go off into that one, let's pray real quick and end this, and then we can talk about that. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you so much for this incredible Bible study we've been able to have, Lord. These parable studies have been such a huge blessing for us, and we weren't very good starting out, but we've been improving more and more, and our minds are able to grapple with deeper and deeper concepts. Lord, we're learning so much through doing this, and we thank you, Lord, so much for helping us to still be able to come together and work these things out. Thank you for the group we have. Thank you for the cooperation and camaraderie that we're able to have, Lord, that helps us bring our minds together in a beautiful, peaceful manner so that we can see the beauty and love in your word. We ask that you continue to bless our studies going forward. Help us, Lord, to get in on this new way of teaching. Help us to be able to understand concepts in a deeper way, to be able to explain them better. You've been leading us out so far, taking us step by step and increasing our talents. And we thank you so much, Lord. Help us to continue forward on that path. We thank you when we pray all these things in the Lord Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
So are you looking